In 2003 in South Korea, several murders occurred that were clearly targeting the homes of the wealthy. With the similarity of these crimes, the police began to suspect that they were facing a serial killer. The strange thing is that after a short period, a different type of crime began to appear in the city. The same thing. These crimes were similar but different from the crimes of the wealthy before. The police at the time did not know that there was a big secret behind this matter. What is this secret? What is the stupid mistake that the killer made in the end and led to his downfall? Follow the story and enjoy. Our story begins in the city of Seoul, the capital of South Korea, on October 9th, 2003. The police received a report of a crime in one of the houses. The area where the crime took place is considered one of the richest areas in the city, an area called Wuji-dong. The one who reported the crime was the victim's husband and the owner of the house. The husband returned from work, and when he entered the house, he found a number of his family members killed. They immediately contacted the police, who immediately afterwards searched the house. Of course, they were the criminal police who specialize in murder crimes, but even they, although they were accustomed to crimes, say that when they entered the house, they felt a dark and evil energy in the place. As soon as they saw the bodies of the victims, as soon as they entered the house, they came across the bathroom entrance. There they found the body of the grandmother lying on the ground, face down, covered in blood. This grandmother was the mother of the owner of the house. When they entered the house more, they were confronted by the kitchen. In front of the kitchen, there was a fish tank, and when they passed the tank, they found the owner's wife, the same thing, lying on the floor, face down, covered in blood, and her head had been violently hit, meaning there was a deep dent in her head and skull. At that moment, even the investigators were confused about the murder weapon. What weapon could have caused all these dents and big, deep blows at the same time? They walked further inside the house, and then they came across the stairs leading to the second floor. The stairs were all covered in blood. The blood was running down from the top to the bottom of the stairs, and at the top of the stairs was the son's body. The same thing, hit in the head and lying on the ground, his head open. The crime scene was terrifying even for the criminal police, and the thing they were most surprised about was that there were no signs of resistance. There was no chaos in the place, and they began to ask themselves, was the killer so powerful and strong that he was able to kill 3 people without any resistance? Even if these people were weak, the investigators began to think about the possibility that the killer was someone close to the family, maybe even the husband himself, and they actually started investigating after him. Of course, this was shocking to the husband or the owner of the house, especially since he lost his mother, wife, and son in this crime, but this was a normal procedure for the police to first suspect the closest people to him. The owner of the house, his name is Jung Won-koo. He was a successful businessman and had a good fortune. The people close to him testified that he is humble and hard-working in his work, and always takes care of the people around him, and in general he is a nice person. So in a meeting through the people around him, the man was far from suspicion. The police investigated everything related to him. They investigated his movements, work, and daily activities, not only because they suspected him, but also to see if there was anyone in his life who might hate him or his family. Because the crime, because of its violence, you feel that it is a personal crime. You do not feel that there is a person who would kill with such violence except for a hateful person. Jung Won-koo, the owner of the house, kept asking the police, "Why are you doing all this to me, and I am the one whose family was killed?" I mean, he asked them with anguish. But the police responded to him and told him that this is our job and this is part of the investigation process. Some of those close to Jun Junko say that he was crying all the time, and sometimes they even felt that he was going crazy. He would sit in front of the fish tank in the house and start screaming at the fish and asking them, "Didn't you see what he did? Who did it? Why did he do it? How did they die?" Poor guy, he even started talking to the fish. After the investigations, the police were unable to find any evidence against the husband or anyone else. They did not find anyone who might have held a grudge or a reason to commit a crime like this. The police were literally confused. A very heinous crime with no clear reason, and nothing was stolen from the house. Neither money nor jewelry nor anything of value. The only thing the police found was a shoe print or shoe print. It seems that the killer left it behind because they compared this print to the shoes of the house owners, and there was no shoe that matched the print, so they immediately agreed that this was the killer's shoe print. Of course, this will not help them in tracking the killer now, but it may help in the investigation in the future. The strange thing that the investigators noticed is that there are people strangers began to flock to the crime scene. These people were also police, but from another department, from a different faraway area. Why were these police present here? These police were from an area called Gangnam, an area far from the neighborhood where the crime occurred. But what happened was that another crime occurred in their area. This Gangnam area is considered the strongest economic area in South Korea, which means the same thing. Most of its residents are wealthy. What happened was that a similar crime occurred 2 weeks before this crime, specifically on September 24, 2003. This is what the house where the crime occurred looked like from the outside. Inside this house, an elderly couple was killed. The husband was a retired university professor, which means he was wealthy and comfortable financially in his life. The couple were found killed due to violent blows to the head. Their skulls were dismembered and broken in a manner similar to the crime we talked about at the beginning. The strangest thing about this case is that there was a box in the wardrobe. This box was full of money, jewelry, and valuables worth tens of thousands. But this box was not even touched. The police immediately ruled out that this could be a robbery and thought that this was most likely a hate crime. The same thing happened. The investigators assumed that the perpetrator of the crime was someone close to the victims. From their experience in this type of case, they thought that they would catch the killer within a week, at most, after they investigated the people who were with the victims. However, after they investigated and searched, they did not find anything. 2 weeks after this crime, the second crime occurred, which we talked about at the beginning of the story. Although the crime was in a different area and under the authority of a different police department, they immediately received news of the similarity between the crime that happened in their area and the crime that happened in that area. The similarity was clear, especially in the method of killing and the weapon used, a weapon that smashes heads. They still did not know what this weapon exactly was. After the investigators heard about the new crime, they went to the crime scene and began trying to see if there was a real connection between the two crimes. Indeed, the similarity was present, but the strangest thing is that the two crimes had no clear reason or motive despite all the violence used in them. You would expect that the person or killer in both crimes held a grudge to kill in this way. But the police did not find anyone with these specifications, and their confusion increased over the murder weapon. They thought of tools that could lead to the same injuries that they had inflicted on the victims' heads, such as pliers, an axe, and a hammer. They thought of all possible tools and even sat down to conduct experiments and simulate blows to try to reach the murder weapon, but to no avail. Even the hammer or sledgehammer, which could have been the closest performance to the murder weapon, did not leave a mark, depth, and size with the same blows that they had inflicted on the victims' heads. The investigators were confused about what the murder weapon was. This man's name is Young Kun, and he is considered the strongest criminal behavior analyst in the Korean police. The criminal behavior analyst's goal is to analyze the criminal's personality and nature. He was called upon to analyze the criminal's personality, especially after they saw the similarity between the two crimes. After reviewing the details, the analyst agreed with the investigator's opinion that the two crimes were related to the analyst. After noticing that the two crimes were committed against people or families, from the wealthy class of society, but without stealing any of their money or possessions. The analyst began to suspect that the killer had a grudge against the wealthy. This means that these crimes might actually be crimes of hatred, but they were committed randomly. He became afraid that this killer would turn into a serial killer and that he had twisted motives behind his crimes, such as seeing himself as a hero who achieves justice and exacts revenge on the wealthy who plundered society. He might come from a poor class or family that was wronged by the wealthy, and now he has a grudge against them. These fears were confirmed shortly after, when the third crime occurred. The third crime took place on October 16, 2003, meaning a week after the second crime. The crime scene was in the same area of Gongnam where the first crime occurred, but in a different neighborhood. The crime also took place in a house, and like the previous crimes, when the investigators entered the house, they felt the same sense of darkness and evil. They felt it before and after they analyzed the crime scene and examined it. They found that the killer entered the house and found the victim, who was an old woman, and dragged her to the bathroom. There, he killed her with the same weapon and in the same way, violent and deep blows to the head. This victim was also considered to be from the wealthy class. The police then began to notice a recurring pattern, which is that many of the victims were elderly. The police kept searching all over the house for any trace or evidence. They examined the house from the inside, then went outside and examined the garden and the outer courtyard. When they reached the external air conditioning units, they discovered something important. They found a shoe print on top of one of the air conditioners. It seems that the killer climbed on top of the air conditioners to enter the house, because the air conditioners were attached to the wall. The investigators immediately did the first thing they did, which was to compare this shoe print with the print they found in the second crime before. As they expected, the two prints were completely identical, and this confirmed to them without a doubt that the killer in both crimes was the same person, which means that their worst fears have come true. The criminal is a serial killer. Of course, serial killers are the hardest to catch because they commit their crimes randomly. They may target a specific group of people, like this killer who targets the wealthy. But the targeting is random, meaning that the killer could be any person from the millions of people living in this city. After the third crime, reports and news stories began to appear in the media and on television about this case. Although the police did not announce anything and did not announce that these cases were related, the news leaked to the media in one way or another, and the media began to link the crimes together and announce to the people that there was a serial killer committing crimes in the city of Seoul. Of course, this is something that the police leadership did not want because it would spread panic among the people, so they tried to cover up the matter, and when journalists asked them, they kept saying that they did not have conclusive evidence that these crimes were related. Of course, in South Korea, especially at that time, serial killers were a rare thing, and they did not begin to appear until the 90s. The first serial killer was documented in Korea was in 1994, and there weren't many serial killers in Korea. So when one comes out, it's normal for this to cause panic among people. The investigation efforts continued, but without result, and the police were waiting at any moment for a new crime to happen. But this time, more than a month passed and things were calm and even. Some investigators thought that maybe the killer stopped his crimes after the news started to spread. Maybe he got scared. But on November 18, 2003, a new incident occurred. Emergency forces responded to a report of a fire that broke out in a two-story house in a neighborhood called Hyeodong, which was also one of the wealthy neighborhoods in Seoul. After extinguishing the fire, the civil defense found two bodies inside the house. The first body was the owner of the house, who was an old man of 87 years old, and the second body was the housemaid who was 50 years old. There was also a 1-year-old child in the house, but he miraculously survived. At first, the police did not think that this incident was related to the crimes that happened before or to the serial killer, because the case was very different and there was fire in the subject. But after they took a close look at the two bodies that were partially burned, they noticed violent blows to the victims' heads. These blows were most likely the cause of their death before the fire and before the fire. These blows were of course similar to the previous crimes, and the same thing happened. The victim here was a wealthy and elderly person. They began to think that this case was related to the one before it. Their suspicions were confirmed conclusively when they found a shoe mark in the burned house. As they expected, the shoe mark was identical to the mark they found before in the second and third crimes. This of course confirmed to them that this was the same killer and that this was a continuation of his crimes. After this crime, no one had any doubt that this was a serial killer. This term was used in all media outlets. It was impossible to cover up the matter. After this confirmation, a central investigation headquarters was established jointly between several police departments. This investigation was one of the largest investigations in the history of the Korean police. Because they did not have evidence or a clear thread that they could follow, they had no solution. In addition to using a large number of policemen, they set up a large number of checkpoints, especially in the areas where crimes occurred, and they stopped a large number of cars for inspection, especially at night. They tried to use different methods in the investigation. For example, they tried to get all the phone numbers that were close to the crime scenes during the time the crimes were committed. Of course, this was a semi-desperate attempt because the number of numbers they had to investigate would be terrible, but despite that, they tried to allocate a large number of policemen to follow all the people whose phones were close to the crime scenes at the time they were committed. They even tried to predict the place where the next crime might occur. They began to analyze the names of the areas and neighborhoods where the crimes occurred, and they arrived at the theory that the criminal commits his crimes in neighborhoods whose names have a certain alphabetical combination or certain letters. They began to delve into these theories. Of course, all of these were semi-desperate methods and attempts. They were like someone who is clinging to any straw he can get his hands on. And in the end, all of these things did not work. It didn't yield any results, but luckily for them, one of the officers discovered that there were surveillance cameras on a building overlooking the street leading to the house where the fourth crime took place. The crime of the house that burned down. This shot that you see in front of you shows a man walking on the same street a little while after the crime. He was the only person who appeared on the camera during that period, and it wasn't a clear shot. It was just from behind, and his face wasn't visible. The police took this shot and showed it to the victims' relatives and family and asked them if they knew who this person was. But the victim's family answered in the negative, but they told them that they knew the coat or jacket that this man was wearing, and they all confirmed without a doubt that this jacket belonged to the victim. So the police knew that this man had stolen the victim's jacket and that he was the killer they were looking for. But in any case, unfortunately, this footage wasn't going to help them identify him, but it remains evidence. There was an internal dispute among the investigators over whether to publish this shot to the general public and issue a circular on the killer. And they do not keep it, and it remains secret. Logically, we say that it is better for it to remain secret because it is almost impossible for anyone to recognize the killer from his back. It is better for the footage to remain secret so that the killer does not take precautions in the future. However, if they publish it, he will definitely try to pay more attention to the surveillance cameras and may even wear a mask or a shake in his face. However, on the other hand, the team that supported publishing the footage said that this was necessary so that the killer would be afraid and feel in danger. This is a serial killer and will continue killing if he feels that he is immune and that no one can reach him. However, if the footage is published, he may fear being caught and stop his crimes, at least for a period of time. In the end, after the tug-of-war between the two parties, the second opinion is the one that won. People's safety has priority. If publishing the footage is possible, even to a small extent, to make the killer afraid and stop his crimes, then this is a sacrifice. Indeed, the footage was published in the media, and the police asked anyone who has information about the man who appears in the footage to contact them, and they announced that a reward of 50 million won, which is approximately $35,000. Unexpectedly, the murders stopped. The police were not sure if the footage was the reason or something else. But the important thing is that the crime stopped, and that was their initial goal. The police remained on the lookout, of course, but the killer apparently actually stopped and remained inactive for a while. However, with the advent of 2004, completely new types of crimes began to appear. This time, the victims were different, and the method of the crime was different. A high school girl was at a party at her grandmother's house. After the party ended, she left her grandmother's house to return home. She was walking on the street by herself at night. Suddenly, a person attacked her with a knife and stabbed her several times, killing her a few days later. Another girl this time was a university student. After she finished university, she went out with her friends and stayed out late at night. On her way home, the same thing happened. A person attacked her and stabbed her to death with a knife. The third crime, a wife was walking alone in the street at night, and the same thing happened. A person attacked her and stabbed her several times, but this time, fortunately, she miraculously survived and did not die. But she will continue to suffer from paralysis and permanent disability. These crimes continued, and this time they were all in the southwestern region of Seoul. Every week or two, there was a new crime, and all the crimes had a clear pattern. The victims were women or girls walking alone in the street at night, and they were suddenly attacked from behind with a knife and stabbed brutally until death. Of course, the police immediately noticed the recurring pattern. There was no doubt that the perpetrator of these crimes was one person, meaning a serial killer. Here, the police began to feel an incredible pressure. Is it possible that there are two serial killers in the city? I mean, usually a serial killer would not pass by them except every 5 or 10 years. Is it possible that now there are two serial killers who appeared at the same time? Did the second one take inspiration from the first, or what was the story? The investigators were terribly confused. Some investigators thought that maybe this is the same. The killer just changed his method and goals. But at the same time, there is literally no link between the previous crimes and these new crimes. The type of victims is different, the weapon is different, the area in which the crimes occur is different, the method of execution is different. Instead of breaking into houses, he kills the victims in the street. There is no logical link between the crimes that occurred before and the new crimes, except that they are serial killer crimes. So they were unable to confirm whether this is the same killer or a new one. It is something beyond imagination that there are two serial killers at the same time and in the same city. Stay tuned, because this is a secret that we will not know until the end of the story. The police, of course, spread out in large numbers in the southwestern regions where the crimes occurred. And a large number of them worked undercover, meaning they wore civilian clothes, sat in civilian cars, stopped on the side of the road, and watched for long hours from early at night until dawn. But unfortunately, all their efforts did not yield any results. Of course, these new cases of killing women and girls in the street, were handled by a different police team than the first team, because this is an area completely different, but both teams knew about all the cases that were happening. The first team, who were responsible for the first crimes, which were crimes of the wealthy, did not reach anything in their case. After several months passed without similar crimes occurring, the case was considered cold, meaning that work on it decreased because they had other cases that were a priority. However, they felt that the killer could reappear at any moment because someone with tendencies cannot resist their desire to kill. It becomes like an addiction. We reached March 2004, and the murders of women that used to happen in the street also stopped, but after that a new type of crime began to appear in the city. A type different from the first and different from the second, a third type that was completely new. However, this type of crime is usually not paid attention to by anyone, and the police rarely investigate it. The reason is the type of victims, because the victims this time, may God protect you, were women who work in prostitution. Let's call them prostitutes. Girls, these women are the best victims for serial killers because it is rare for anyone to care or notice their disappearance first. Prostitution is legally forbidden in Korea. But it was widespread at that time, and the main reason that allowed its spread was the corruption of the police. Many of the police at that time were accepting bribes from the owners of prostitution establishments in order to turn a blind eye to them. On the contrary, even some of the policemen were protecting these establishments and institutions and their owners from the interference of the security services. That is, even if some honest police appeared who wanted to reform or stop prostitution, the corrupt ones among them would start threatening them and pressuring them, because this was a source of profit for them. On the other hand, some of the owners of these prostitution establishments and institutions became informants who cooperated with the police in other cases that the police considered more important, such as drug and crime cases and others. Many of the police, even those who did not receive money and bribes, became, meaning within this system, they turn a blind eye to prostitution establishments in exchange for their owners cooperating with them in more sensitive cases. But this entire field remains illegal and unlawful. The girls or women who work in it are considered outside the scope of the law. When one of them disappears, it is rare for anyone to ask about her. These girls usually have left their families and relatives, and there are no people around them who care about them. All their contact is with the manager who arranges work for them. Even if this manager notices their disappearance, the first thing he thinks about is that this girl ran away from herself or decided to leave the field. If he thinks that something happened to her, he cannot go to the police and file an official report, because he will be putting himself in the line of fire legally and could expose the business. Everything in their field has to happen from the bottom up. What happened at the beginning of March 2004 was that some of these night girls suddenly started to disappear. Of course, the only ones who noticed this were the owners and managers of the prostitution businesses. They noticed that some of the girls who worked for them started to disappear. With time, the rate of these disappearances started to increase. At first, a girl would disappear once a month. Then it became every 2 weeks. Then it became every week. The daughter of one of the managers of this prostitution business was a former policeman. Imagine a policeman turned prostitution manager. This former policeman noticed that a number of the girls who worked for him had disappeared. At first, he thought that they had gone missing or had quit their jobs, but then, with the increase in disappearances, he felt that there was something suspicious. To this day, neither he nor any other managers of the prostitution business had reported the disappearance of any girl, because, as we said, their work was originally illegal. Consequently, these disappearances continued without anyone investigating them, and the police had no news about them. Things continued in this manner for months. But one day, specifically on July 15, 2004, this manager, who was a former policeman, received a call. As soon as he saw the number on the phone screen, he knew that this number belonged to one of the girls who used to work for him, and that this girl had disappeared a few months ago. He was surprised when he saw the number and immediately answered, expecting that the girl who had disappeared would call him. But he was surprised that the person calling him was on the other end. The second man was saying that he was a customer and asked him for a girl. Of course, this was a terrible mistake by the criminal that he used a phone to return one of his victims. But this is what happens when the killer starts to take it easy and trust himself too much. This is where he starts to lose his caution and commit stupid mistakes like this. The manager or the former policeman told him, "Okay, we will fulfill your request, and I will be in contact with you when the girl is ready." Of course, he was now almost certain that this man was responsible for the girl's disappearance. And why did he have the phone of the girl who disappeared? So this manager decided to become an informant and contacted one of his old colleagues. From his days working in the police, his colleague is now an investigator. He contacted him and told him the story. He said that because there were girls who had been disappearing for a while, and now a strange man called him from the phone of one of the girls who disappeared. This investigator's name is Yang Bel-ju. Immediately after the news arrived, he took the matter seriously and immediately moved and went to his old friend, who was the manager of the prostitution ring. Together, he cooked up his plans quickly. To lure the man who called, of course, in order to arrest him, they had to use one of the girls as bait. So he brought a girl and gave her instructions to meet this man, and they would watch from afar. Of course, they did not tell her anything about the matter. Then the manager called the man and told him that the girl is ready. Where would you like to meet her? Of course, the manager is not supposed to be there anyway. He just sends the girl, and she meets the customer in the place he specifies. So the man specified a location in a garden and told him to send the girl there. The manager gave instructions to the girl to go to this place, and he and the investigator followed her from afar. Indeed, the girl went to the specified location, but after a short while she returned to the manager and the investigator, who were surprised and asked her what happened. She told them that when this man or customer saw her from afar, he called her and rejected her and said that she was tall and did not suit him. He did not even meet her, but he saw her from afar. The investigator and the manager were surprised and afraid that the man noticed them or suspected something and decided to run away. But what they did not know was that this height issue was due to another secret that we know. Then only a few minutes passed, and the same man called the manager again and asked for another girl, but this time he told him to send me a shorter girl. He told the manager, "Okay, we will fulfill your request." And indeed, the manager contacted another girl, and they brought her to the same place. And this time, the man kissed the girl, and the investigator and the manager were able to see him clearly. After they were sure that this was the wanted man, they immediately moved to arrest him. Before they moved to arrest him, the investigator even requested support from the police patrols that were present in the vicinity. And indeed, the investigator surprised the man and arrested him with the help of the manager, who of course knew things for him since he was a former policeman. But the man began to resist violently. He began to try to free himself from them with all his strength. Of course, it is impossible for someone who has not done anything to resist violence. But quickly, support arrived and a number of policemen gathered around him and were able to hold him down. Although there were 5 or 6 police officers above his head, he continued to resist violently while trying to free himself from them. They were able to restrain him and put handcuffs on our hands. The police knew from that moment that this was the person behind the disaster, or he wouldn't have resisted to this extent. Of course, the police and investigators still didn't know in detail about the disappearance of the night girls. But when they found out about the subject, they began to suspect that this man had a connection to the cases that occurred at the beginning of 2004, in which a number of women were killed while walking alone in the streets at night. The case that we talked about these cases, and that the police believed that they were cases that went back to a serial killer, and some of them even believed that they were related to the crimes that occurred before the crimes of killing the wealthy that occurred at the end of 2003, which we talked about at the beginning. Now, to summarize, we have 3 cases. The first case is the crimes of killing the wealthy, and after the second case, which were crimes of killing women or girls who walk alone in the streets at night. And the third case is the disappearance of the night girls. Each of these cases was very different from the other, but perhaps the last 2 cases have a similarity in that the victims are all women, and also the area in which they occurred. The cases of missing prostitutes are close to the southern regions where women were killed in the street. So the lovers thought that there might be a connection between the 2 cases. Maybe this man is the key to solving all these cases. Anyway, the investigators took the matter very seriously and started investigating with him. The man's name is Yu Young Chul, and he is 34 years old. Of course, they did not have clear evidence against him, but they knew that he was behind the disaster, especially since he tried to violently resist arrest. So they started trying to pressure him during the investigation to get a confession from him. They started asking him about the missing girl's phone and why she had the phone. Yu Young-chul kept saying this at first, and even when he came to the investigators, he did not say anything clearly. But I want to tell you something about the Korean police, especially at that time. The Korean police's method was very rude. It was normal for them to treat the accused violently to extract confessions from them. One of the investigators was hit on the head from behind. It was not a strong hit, but it was like a disciplinary hit, as if he was a young boy at first. Yu Young-chul did not react strongly and tried to remain calm, but the investigator returned to talk to him again, and when he did not respond, he hit him again in the same place, but a little harder. Here, Yu Young-chul lost his temper and started screaming and saying to the investigators, "You bastards, do you think you can do me? I know that you will all be promoted if I say that I killed people. This is what you want." After this fit of anger, the investigators knew that they could provoke him more than anyone who was present at that moment. The leader of this police unit brought himself to attend the investigation. This leader's name is Kang Dae-wan, and he has a strange personality. Even when he speaks, you feel like he is a gang leader or that there is no leader in the police. The leader says that when Yu Young-chul started screaming at them, he got angry and slapped him on the face and said, "I am the leader." This is a scene that sounds like it came out of the movie 120. After this slap and these words, Yang-chul got angry and started screaming and saying to them, "I am the wrath of the gods. I have punished the fallen women and have punished them. The punishment for the rich who ruined society, you all cannot handle me. The punishment sent from heaven, the idiot ruined it to the end and confessed to everything. He confessed that he was the one who killed the night girls, and he also confessed that he was the one who killed the rich before that." Of course, this is one of the traits that is always associated with serial killers, which is narcissism. They see themselves as a higher entity than humans. So when the investigators beat him, he felt belittled, so he had to do something to let them know that he is above them and they are below, and this is the only thing that came out with him. He confessed to what he did and was proud of it. Here the investigators, of course, they knew, meaning that they won, but they needed more details from him. Yu Young-chul started to calm down and said to them, "I want my mother. I want to confess to my mother." The investigators were surprised, but they told him okay, and they were able to contact his mother and sent a patrol to bring her. And his mother and his sister arrived at the police station. When the investigators talked to her, they told her that her son was being held by them, and that he asked them to bring her so that he could confess to her, the mother. She replied to them in a frustrated tone and said to them, "What did he do this time?" From her reaction, it was clear that she was tired of his problems. That's it, she reached her limit. As if she washed her hands of him, the police chief told her that he wanted to confess. But he refused to confess to them and wanted to confess to her. The mother said, "Okay, for God's sake, let's see," and entered the investigation room with her son. But even the mother did not expect what she was going to hear. He confessed to his mother that he is a murderer and that he killed dozens of people. The mother, as soon as she heard his words, she fainted immediately, and they had to take her to the hospital. Music arrived after that. The investigators continued the investigation with him, and Young-chul started giving them detailed confessions. The first thing he confessed, that he had been watching the homes of the wealthy and hunting for weeks to study his target, and he usually chose the victims from the elderly because they are weaker and easier to kill. Then he planned the operation to break into the house and carried it out. As for his victims from the prostitutes, he would ask for them as if he were a customer. Then he would take them to his apartment, and there he would commit vice with them, and after that, when he smoked, the smoke followed him. And by the way, the weapon he was using was a hammer. One of those things they use to break walls. It wasn't a regular hammer. He cut the handle of the hammer short so he could use it more easily as a murder weapon. He would enter the bathroom behind the girl while holding his hammer and hit her on the head until she died. Then he would start the second stage, which was getting rid of the body. Of course, he lived in an apartment in the middle of a multi-story building, so it was impossible for him to get out. He got out the body in one piece, so the solution was simply that he would bring a saw and start cutting the body into pieces and cleaning it in the bathroom. The amount of water he was using was very high in the building. The police would know about this later when they asked the owner of the building, because all the residents of this building pay the water bill as one unit. That means not every apartment has its own water bill. So the owner of the building noticed that the amount of water used by the entire building had increased significantly in the past few months. The reason behind all this was Yoon Chul, who used large amounts of water to wash the bodies of his victims. The patient said that after the process of cutting up was one of the things he enjoyed most during the killing process. He even studied the anatomy of the human body that doctors teach in order to learn how to cut up faster and more accurately. Of course, cutting up is easier the smaller the body is, so he refused the tall girl. If you remember, he wanted his victim to be smaller in size. After that, he would pick up the body parts and put them in garbage bags. Then imagine that he would stop a taxi on the street and put these bags in the taxi and get in the taxi and ask it to take him to the place where he would bury the body. Imagine that the braggart uses taxis to transport the bodies, and when the taxi drivers smell the odor and ask, "Look at these bags," he tells them, "This is a scumbag." Whoever doesn't know, scumbags is bad. So this criminal would put scumbags inside the bags to cover up the smell of the body. Of course, the bodies after that didn't. It rotted but still smelled bad, so he used the rag to cover it up as an excuse for the taxi drivers. And after the taxi reached the desired location, he continued on his way carrying the bags. The place where he used to bury the bodies was a high hill located in a somewhat isolated place among the trees. In this place, he would dig a hole and bury the bags in it, and he would mark the place he dug and put a small cover over the hole. Why? Because he intended to continue and would come back again and bury a different body in the same area. He did not want to dig the same spot twice, so he would put this cover as a mark, so he would know where he dug before. Of course, he continued these killings for a period of several months until he was caught. This area was filled with bodies. The investigators were shocked by these details. They did not expect that the one in front of them was a devil to this degree. They were then intending to ask him about the second case, which was the case of the women or girls who were stabbed with a knife while they were walking in the street alone at night, meaning that he has now confessed to the first case, which is the case of the wealthy elderly. And he confessed to the third case, which concerns the prostitutes. But he did not talk about the case in the middle, the case of stabbing women in the street. But before the investigators could ask about this case, something surprising happened. Yoon Chul had an epileptic fit and even started foaming at the mouth. When he saw them, the investigators quickly treated him. After he started to regain consciousness, he looked tired, of course, and asked them to untie him so he could rest. The lover untied him. After that, most of those who were in the investigation room went out to take a break, and only the investigators remained with him in the room. There was an investigator sitting on the table opposite him, and the second investigator was sitting on the side with his laptop open. At a strange moment, the investigator who was sitting opposite the criminal got up from his seat and left the room, thinking that the second investigator who was sitting on the laptop was paying attention to the criminal, but the second investigator was the one who, sitting on the laptop, all his focus was on the laptop. He was not focused on the criminal or the investigator who had just left. Suddenly, without noticing, the criminal got up on his own, took his laptop, and left the investigation room. When Yang Chul saw himself alone in the room and no one else was there, the criminal got up from his seat and went out to the corridor and started walking barefoot. even though it was late at night. The department was empty and no one noticed him. Imagine that he was able to reach the stairs and went down and simply left the building. When the investigators returned to the room and did not find him, they went crazy and started asking who was with him. How did he get out? The situation suddenly turned into chaos, and immediately there was a general alert for all the police forces present, and even those who were sleeping in their homes were immediately summoned, and police officers spread out everywhere, searching for him. The situation was tragic. How a dangerous serial killer was in their hands, and suddenly he became free. The disaster now means that he has nothing to lose. He can kill anyone he finds in the street without an iota of interest. The police searched every street and every alley around the department, but to no avail. The criminal disappeared without a trace. They kept searching for him all night long. The more time passed, the search expanded and the chances of finding him decreased. This detective, whose name was Kim Sang-jong, had an idea, so he took some police officers with him and headed to the Yongdong-po area, which is also known as the red light district. This is the area where prostitution is concentrated, and all the prostitutes who were victims are from this area. The lover thought that if Yu Yon-tol tried to kill again, he would probably go to this area because he knows it well and because the type of victims he prefers are found there. So this detective went with his team of police officers and started searching in this area. They kept searching all night long until morning came, and people started going out for work and errands while they were still searching in the area. Suddenly, without introductions, one of the police saw Yuan Chul walking in the street among the people and immediately shouted at all the officers around him and pointed at him and said to them, "This is him, this is him." The police quickly gathered around him and he tried to escape, but they surrounded him and caught him. He kept resisting violently like the first time and tried to evade them, but they were able to hold him down in the end. Then they took him and returned him with them to the police station. All the investigators felt indescribable relief when they knew that he had been caught a second time. It would have been a disaster if he had managed to kill before they caught him. Most likely, they would all have lost their jobs and perhaps the entire police force would have been dissolved. Glory be to God. So how did this situation happen? By chance, he managed to escape and was caught by chance. After they returned to the investigation room, Yuan Chul started applauding them and said to them, "Well done for catching me quickly, because I intended to kill at least 100 more people." I mean, God really protected the investigators after that, and they continued the investigation. He was cooperative and kept giving them all the details they wanted while bragging. He knew that everything was exposed, so now the best thing for his narcissistic personality is for him to keep confessing and bragging and keep telling them, "I killed, I did, I went and I came." Of course, like we said before he ran away, they wanted to ask him about the second case, which was the case of the women and girls who were assaulted while they were walking alone in the street at night. In Yang Chil, he told them, "Yes, I killed him." They asked him why he changed his method and the weapon of his crime. "Why did you use a knife instead of a hammer?" He told them, "I just wanted to try," meaning he told them that in the beginning he used to break into the homes of wealthy elderly people and kill them. Then when he felt the pressure, especially after his picture was spread in the media, he decided to stop for a while. Then he started trying to attack random women and girls walking alone in the street. This time he decided to use a knife because it is a faster weapon. After that, when he had felt that the police were lying in wait for him in the streets, the knight decided to take a different and safer path. And from here, the idea of targeting night girls came to his mind. He could lure them to his apartment and kill them at his ease, and at the same time, no one would care about him looking for them. He added that they deserved punishment because they work in this business. Stay with me until the end of the story, because as I told you, there is an additional secret that we will reveal in the end. The police then asked him to show them the place where he buried the bodies. He showed them the place, and a number of investigators went with him to the spot. As soon as he dug and found one body of the victims, the next morning they decided to hold an official ceremony at this location to reveal all of the bodies. The matter reached the media and spread among the people. For the first time, the serial killer who terrorized the city appeared in front of the media. They were wearing a jacket, a cap, and a medical mask to hide his face. By the way, they always do this in Korea. They don't reveal the faces of criminals. I mean, even the pictures we get of him are all old pictures, or the media got them somehow or in another. But the police do not reveal the faces of the criminals, and the reason is so that they do not become famous and encourage others to become criminals out of fame. I honestly do not know if this thing is effective, but this is the situation they have. Anyway, the police began digging at the burial site of the victims, and there was a large gathering around the place of journalists and ordinary people. The digging continued until they extracted all the bodies. The scene was shocking because the number of bodies was large, and every time they extracted a body, the criminal told them the details, telling them where he found this girl and what he did to her. He remembered each victim and told the details while bragging and enjoying it. After that, during this media event, he was given the opportunity to speak in front of the cameras. I honestly do not know why he did this, but listen to what this criminal said. His narcissism was beyond what you can imagine. Every time he spoke, he said that he was the wrath of the gods and that he was sent to punish the bad people who destroy society. He took every opportunity to brag about his crimes, acting as if he had a great goal. After that, the police went to his apartment. They broke in to search the apartment. Initially, it was clean, and even when they entered the bathroom was apparently clean. But of course, the forensic team has chemicals that reveal traces of blood, even after they clean it. There is a substance called luminol that makes traces of blood glow in the dark. Imagine after they sprayed this substance, the entire bathroom became lit up from the amount of blood that stained the walls and ceiling due to the many crimes that occurred in the bathroom. One of the police said something. He said that whoever lived here was definitely a demon, not a human. Among the things they found was a sketchbook, and his level of drawing was good. He could have become a professional artist if he wanted to. Among the drawings they found was a drawing of himself in two forms, a cute smiling boy, and next to him was the other form, which was a form of something. Of course, if this drawing indicates anything, it indicates the psychological illnesses he has. After that, the police found the murder weapon, the hammer that he used in the murder. They did not find it in the apartment, but in a nearby place. He led them to it. They had hidden it behind an external air conditioning unit. The hammer, although it was clean, and it is certain that young Seoul used to clean it after every crime, but it had holes and small places where some traces of the victim's DNA could remain. The police conducted precise tests on the hammer to extract any possible traces from it, and indeed the results came back from the lab were positive. They found several traces of the victim's DNA on the hammer and were able to identify a large number of them. Some of the traces belonged to the wealthy elderly victims and some belonged to prostitutes. This weapon confirmed without a doubt its connection to this case, which is the case of the wealthy and the case of prostitutes. But the case that they have no evidence for yet is the second case, which is the case of women and girls who walk in the street by themselves at night. The only thing that linked him to this case is his confessions. They did not find the knife that he used to commit the crimes, and he said that he got rid of this knife or threw it away, and he does not know where it is. So they do not have tangible evidence linking him to the crimes. But since he confessed, it is finished, meaning it is now included. His crimes, but the secret and the shocking surprise that the police would not discover until 2 years later is that he was not the perpetrator of these crimes. The man behind these crimes was a second serial killer. Yes, there was a second serial killer working at the same time and in the same city. This is very rare for this second killer to happen. His name is Nam Gyu. They will arrest him in 2006, meaning 2 years after Young Chul was arrested. So the question now is, why did Young Chul confess to his crimes? Was it narcissism that motivated him, and he said to himself, "It's ruined, it's ruined"? The answer is no. The motive was much stranger. 2 of the investigators who were handling the case offered him a bribe so that he would confess to the crimes. Yoon Chul had a son, his son. Of course, he did not live with him. He most likely lived with his mother. So these 2 investigators, Ji Yoon and Young Chul, told him, "We will take care of your son and his financial expenses until he graduates from university in exchange for you confessing to committing the crimes." They told him, "That means she is ruined. Ruined, so he confessed to additional crimes, some additional crimes, and your son will have a comfortable life." Why did these investigators do this? Because at that time, the promotion system in the Korean police depended on your success rate and how many of your cases could be closed. Instead of leaving these cases pending, they decided to stick him and take the glory in promotions. The Korean police had many problems, and the Young Chul case was one of the cases that led to major internal investigations in the police force. After that, there were reforms and new laws. The important thing is that Young Chul did not commit these crimes that occurred between the murders of wealthy elderly people and the murder of Lev girls. In other words, these crimes are very different. Stabbing with a knife in the middle of the street randomly was not in his character. He was a messenger of the gods who came from heaven to punish the guilty. May God forgive me. The Young Chul case turned into a secret. The police media began to transfer him between the different crime scenes in which he committed his crimes. Among them were the crimes that they believed at the time that he committed. So they would take him from place to place so that he could describe to them how he committed these crimes. And behind them were the media cameras and crowds of people who gathered around them. The police were as if they wanted to show off their victory, and they were not able to hide these movements. But they were as if they wanted to tell people, "Look at how we caught him, look at our achievements." It was something very strange and created more chaos than necessary. I mean, one time, while they were going out to show off, one of the victim's relatives tried to attack him while holding a knife, but the police were able to catch him and calm him down. Young Chul was initially tried on charges of killing 27 or 28 people. But after he was acquitted of the crimes committed by the second serial killer, the number of his victims was confirmed, and he was tried on charges of killing 20 people. This was the final number, at least the victims that they were able to prove. I personally believe that he killed more, but I don't know. In the end, the final sentence was issued against him, and although the case has been going on for more than 20 years, but he is still on the death row, meaning he has not been executed. Although the death penalty law is in place in Korea, they have not carried out any executions since 1997. Young Chul is still in prison to this day. Some investigators and people close to the case say that the only good thing that Young Chul did is that the case led to major internal reforms in the Korean police force. This was at least a positive aspect. And here we have reached the end of our story. If you liked it, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button. These are also some sweet and enjoyable stories that you can watch. Thank you for following. I will see you in the next video.